This is our second from here to there speaker. So Ray Anderson is here to talk about his career. Ray is a board member for Oak Valley College and a very good friend of Mr. Blum's and mine. He has a lot of experience in starting businesses, in consulting. He's a business coach and speaker, regular speaker and teacher. You've done online teaching, you've done in-person teaching, you've done a lot of things.
Right, right.
Okay, so Ray, could I just start out by asking you to go back in your memory to maybe the point in your life where you were somewhere before college age, and just ask you, what were your visions for your life when you were these guys' age?
Well, it depends. We got some people 32 and we got some people 20. So what I'd like to do is kind of take you back to where I was. I did the 10 shot for a reason. I'm a Vietnam veteran. And that had a profound impact on my life. And I want to share a little bit of that with you so you get to understand, you know, you don't know where your life's going to take you. And obviously my intention at that point in my life wasn't to go to Vietnam. But I was what I consider to be a big man on campus. I ran track. I did collect splinters at Northern Michigan University on the basketball team, but you know, I was in. I thought, you know, I was a sophomore in college, and I was looking forward to my junior year, and I didn't follow up on my paperwork. You ever notice that happening when you're in college? You know, and I didn't register. And so this was the spring of 1968, and I got a letter from the college saying, you didn't register, so I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to come back until the following semester. Now, at that point, you know, the draft board, they wouldn't wait more than 3 to 5 weeks before you got a letter that said greetings. Oh. And that was your trip or your invitation to go to Vietnam. So at that point, I decided, you know, I could do one of two things. I could either wait for the draft to get me, or I could join. And my dad said, you know, why don't you think about joining and spending an extra year and seeing if you can get an education or training. So that puts me back into high school. And when I was in high school, I didn't do all that well in school. I managed to get through, but my English teacher used to always ask students to read. And she picked me a lot. She said, Ray, you got a wonderful speaking voice. Have you ever thought about going into radio? And of course, I really hadn't given that much thought until there I am sitting in the recruiter's office, and they have a school, you know, you remember, hello, Vietnam, right? And I'm saying, that's me, I want to go and do that, right? So I joined with the intention of becoming a radio announcer for the military. And so this was in December of 1967 when I actually went in. And after boot camp, do you have any friends who are in the military? Okay, so you understand what that's all about. So I went through boot camp, I did well, and at the end, because of what I wanted to do, the military, my MOS was 7620, and it required a secret clearance. In today's environment, you realize what that means. You know, there's a lot of background checks and things like that. So basically what happened, all my friends were moved to what's called AIT, Advanced Infantry Training or Advanced whatever training, and I just sat there. I was on what was called an administrative hold. And because I'd been a decent soldier in boot camp, they said, hey, we are really short a cadre. We need somebody that can help us. So here I was a 20-year-old kid actually, I wasn't even 21 yet. And my job was to be a drill instructor. So since they were so short, in terms of cadre that were coming back, because the guys were coming back from Vietnam and getting out of the military.
I'm sorry, I have to ask, what does the word cadre mean in this?
Cadre means people who train other troops. And so I was what was described as a candy striper. That means I really didn't have the rank, but I had all the responsibilities. We used to get up the troops at 4 o'clock in the morning. What time do you think we had to get up? You know, 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30, we were getting up so everybody could say, attention! You know, and get them out in line and stand up. You worms, what are you doing here? I mean, you guys have no idea today. If you go in the military, you can't hit them, you can't talk to them. I could do anything I wanted to get them to behave. Anything. And basically, I'm sharing this with you because, I mean, world has changed so radically since then. So I would get them up in the morning, and if we had somebody in a squad, because you put a company, you put it in squads. So each squad's roughly 8 or 9 people. And if we had one guy in the squad who wasn't behaving, I'd simply look at the rest of the squad and I'd say, you got 15 minutes to change his attitude. and if you don't change his attitude, I will, and I'll start with all of you. So I'd come back, and he might have been a bit pummeled or beaten up, but basically we had conformity. Now you're probably saying, well, why would you do that? Why would you beat on these poor guys? Well, you know, the truth was that one of the things that we were interested in is how do we get these guys to understand that if you want to play independent, when you're in Vietnam, you're apt to kill somebody else and kill the buddy who's sitting in the foxhole with you. So teamwork and the ability to obey was so radically important that that's what we trained and we taught. So I spent almost 8 months there, and finally they sent me off to my MOS, and within a year I was in Vietnam. So the point is that, you know, going to Vietnam, I had strong attitudes about the war, and they were all bad. And the only reason I joined is because my dad said, sometimes, son, it's more important to do your duty than doing what you want to at any given time in your life. So I went. And I was attached to the 82nd Airborne, 3rd Brigade Division, you know. And my job was to write articles on behalf of the military at that point. So I'd get assigned to go out in the field, see what was going on, and try to figure out. And about 4 months in, I was wounded. Now, what isn't your typical?
As a Army journalist, you were.
As an Army journalist, and I was hit in the breast with a football when we were playing football. So I didn't get a Purple Heart for that. I did get a bruise that was pretty purple. But,
kind of a Purple Heart.
Right. But anyway, the bizarre part about this, it really swelled badly, and after 3 weeks, I went to to medics, and I said, you know, this is not right. You know, something's not right here. So they sent me up to have surgery. So at 21, I had a breast removed. You know, which is kind of an odd thing.
Who threw that football? Like from a rocket launcher? Or?
Yeah, it was deflected, and it got me where it hurt. So anyway, that's that story. So basically, I got back, right, and after the surgery, and the supply sergeant was giving everything back, and he says, "Okay, let's go get your weapon." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to take a weapon." And he says, "What?" I said, "I'm not taking a weapon." He says, "You got to take a weapon." And you know, I want you to know that sometimes in life you don't do anything noble. It's just, at that moment I said, no, I'm not taking a weapon, and you can't make me take one. So I refused.
You're in Vietnam.
I'm in Vietnam, and I refused to take a weapon. My job didn't require one, and I knew guys who, they could have been carrying a nuclear bomb that wouldn't save their lives. And so I knew that if I didn't have a weapon, I could still do my job. It would not be a problem, and if I needed one, if there was a defensive situation, there was always somebody else's gun that I could get. Does that make sense? There was always a body laying around. So I said, for my job, I don't need it, and I'm not taking one. Well, clearly, the supply sergeant wasn't happy, and we had a bit of an argument, but I refused. And so the next day, the captain of our command said, you know, Ray, you know, this is not going to go well. I'm going to give you a week to think about this, but you better make up your mind, because I'm going to have to court-martial you.
Okay, so maybe this is obvious, but let me ask, why didn't you want to take a weapon?
I didn't believe in the war, and look, I was watching kids, you know, take our food, you know, and pick the maggots off it so they could eat it, you know, and I had nothing against the Vietnamese people. All I knew is that these poor people, during the day, we were coming in and pushing one way, and at night the Viet Cong was coming in and pushing another. It was, if you're a person trying to live in a war-torn country like Aleppo or whatever, it's just horrific. And I said, I'm not going to do it, you know. So basically, the captain had made it clear, you know, he's going to give me some time. But we had a division commander, you know, was a lieutenant, and one of our responsibilities that we had to take, and we would escort people into the field, specifically if they were from NBC, ABC, or any other reporter or any other magazine. So in this particular case, this guy by the name of Tom Teedy, who I described as a real cowboy, came to our area, and he said, look, I want to go out to the field. And the lieutenant running the place said, well, Ray, why don't you escort him? And I looked at him and I said, well, you think that's a good idea? I mean, I don't carry weapons. He said, well, I don't see that's a problem. I said, fine. So this guy actually had 2 pearl-handled .45s. I mean, you know, you could carry weapons in Vietnam, and so this guy was a real cowboy, man. You know, so we get in the Jeep, and we're going through, because you know what concertina is? It's barbed wire with sharp ends on it. So you know, you got it around the whole perimeter, because basically you don't want anybody attacking it, and if they do, they're going to get stuck in the. So we're going out through the concertina, and he looks at me and says, "Son, where's your weapon?" And I said, "I don't carry one." He said, what? I said, I don't carry one. So of course he pulls out his notepad, right? And so we spent 4 days together, and it was a magnificent time. One of the reasons that this is an interesting story is that he happened to be from Michigan, and his story was about a young man from Michigan. You were there for 365 days, and they still do that when they send you overseas. But basically, we would go through a stage. You know, we went from being triple-digit midgets, which means we had over 100 days, to double-digit midgets. Now we got 99 days, and then you became a single-digit midget. That means you had 9 days left in country. So the reason that he wanted to do this story, there was a guy from southern Michigan, near Detroit, who only had 7 days left in country, and he was a mine rat. Does anybody know what a mine rat is? Basically, they took the little guys, and they would send them into tunnels, you know, to find out what was going on in there. And they'd have to go in, you know, first of all, to get through, and then find out.
Who dug the tunnels?
Oh, the Viet Cong had, I mean, everything was underground, you know. And so if you could find a tunnel, you had to find out where it was going. But as you might suspect, many of these were booby-trapped. So this poor guy went in, it was booby-trapped, there was a grenade in there, and he tripped the wire, and he killed him. He got killed. So he wanted to do a story on that guy, and then it just happened to be that I was from Michigan too. So we spent 4 days together, and I forgot completely about this guy, and went about my job as I'd always done, and the captain never said anything. And about 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in our little Quonset hut, and a major walks in. That's a field grade officer. And he says, Lieutenant, where's Corporal Anderson? And the lieutenant says, oh, he's right back there. And he says, when I talk to you, you stand at attention. Now, Vietnam was not a place where there was a lot of rigor or formality. So I went in, and I was at a regular desk, and there was a colonel and 4 light bird colonels and majors. So these are all field grade officers. And the guy takes an article, and he spins around, he puts it in my face, and he says, what's the meaning of this? Not good. And a lieutenant colonel got about this far away from my face, and he says, young man, I ought to take you up north and show you where the shit really is. And I remember, you know, I'm your age, right? I looked at him and said, well, you could just put a gun to my head and shoot me right here. You know, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to say at the time. But what I'm sharing with you is that basically that was an act of courage that I never really planned. It transformed the direction of my entire life. And the only reason I was saved from spending time in jail, being dishonorably discharged, and leaving the military as a black mark on my career was because of Tom Teedy. Because basically they were stuck.
Journalist?
The journalist. This article appeared in 800 newspapers in the United States.
So they couldn't.
I got letters from people all over the U.S. to my family and everything, congratulating me on my courage, etc., blah, 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 blah. And I stayed, and I was there for 15 months, and I never carried a weapon after that. And the amazing thing, in 3 weeks, now this is the military, mind you, 3 weeks, I had a conscientious objector status directly from the Pentagon. So for the balance of my time there, I was a conscientious objector. So I want to share that with you because it set a trajectory for my life. And so I got out, and I wanted to become a journalist. I mean, that really triggered in my mind, you know, the need to be a journalist. And since I found that for the first 2 years of my college career, I found that studying interfered with my social life, and my track life, and my basketball life. You know, so the point is, when I got back, I transferred to Michigan State, and I completed 3 years in 2. I mean, it's amazing how, when you have your life on the line, how it focuses what you want to do and what you want to become. So I'm telling you, you don't know where you're going to go, but you know, it's those moments that can really define your life and change it. And so I became a journalist, and I ended up in North Carolina, where I was a journalist for over a year. This was right after the riots. If you remember, we're talking about 1972, 73, and ironically, Michael Jordan was in junior high when I was at Wilmington, North Carolina, and he was going to school, kind of a little nobody, you know. Of course, I had no idea who he was. But the truth is, you know, it helped really me understand what I wanted to do with my life, and it all came because of this accident going in the military. I wouldn't have probably become a journalist. But even after that, I was a journalist for 3 years, decided to move to North Carolina, from North Carolina because of a girl, to San Francisco, and I got to San Francisco, and we lasted about 4 weeks, and you know, I'm single again, and I had a chance to work for Bechtel. Does anybody know who Bechtel is?
No.
Bechtel is a major project planning corporate organization that does construction throughout the world. pipelines, gas lines, and they acquired the contract to build the Trans-Alaska pipeline. For the next 3 years, I worked on the Trans-Alaska pipeline. And my ex-wife came up there with me, and we made a ton of money. And by the time I was 30, we moved back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where she was working on her doctorate. I bought a fourplex, we bought a triplex, and we started moving. Then I went on to get my master's degree. And at that point, it was an interpersonal communication. Because I really liked the journalism, but I was struggling with, you know, there was a lot of the lib movement and everything else, and trying to figure out how do we communicate more effectively with one another. And so after about 2 years, I got a call from somebody here in California saying, look, we're looking for somebody who can come up and do some report analysis for us on the Northwest Alaskan pipeline. They were going to build a gas line. And it said it was in Irvine. So I talked to my wife and I looked at a map, and believe it or not, in 1980, there was no Irvine on the map. I mean, I thought, well, this must be a real podunk place, right? When I got here, there was one hotel in Irvine. There was the airport was there, but it was much smaller, and that was it. You know, I mean, and Fluor had a big building out in the corner. There was just fields all over the place. There was no construction or whatever. But I thought, geez, I was going to get paid $40,000. This is back in 1980, and I was struggling to go through school. We had the properties and all that stuff, but it was still a grind. So I took the job, and I've been here ever since. But that lasted about 2 years, and then my wife decided she wanted to be with somebody else, and I left that situation. But the good news, I found a wonderful woman. We've had 4 kids. We've been married 33 years, Amber knows. You know, and so the whole point is you watch your life go, and it transforms and it changes, and you never know where you're going to take it, but never lose your passion. You know, never lose your heart and your ability to stand for what you believe in. And what I see today, and I really appreciate about young people, as a young person, I got back from Vietnam, and I was a member of the VVAW, Vietnam Veterans Against the War. You know, and it really, for me, it blesses my heart to watch young people today, you know, standing up and saying, hey, you know, this will not stand. And I know for a lot of people, they say, why are they doing this, etc. But it's in my heart to tell you, look, if you believe in something, go out and get it and make it happen. We need people today who have the courage to stand up against injustice and make something happen. And it's going to be you guys. It's not going to be us. You know, my time has passed. But my joy in this is being able to pass on a legacy to you guys, because I'm going to hand you guys a gauntlet. And it's not just a matter of me handing it to you. You're on the hook. You know, if we're going to transform the world, it's going to be you guys, not me. And we need you guys to come in here and make a difference on behalf of Christianity. And I have this program called Good-Hearted Leadership, which I've done now for years. And people say, good-hearted leadership. What are we going to do with that? We don't have time for kumbaya. We have a business to run, right? And I tell them, no, it's not kumbaya, it's money in the bank. You treat people with dignity and respect and listen to them and hear them, they'll move mountains for you. And here's something I learned about leadership. While I was in Vietnam, we learned there are 2 types of leaders. There's leaders you take a bullet for, and there's leaders you reserve a bullet for, right? And the point is, you don't screw with a guy who's got an M16. You know, if you want to mess with him, it's probably not healthy. And the point is, here today, you may not have a gun, but you have your principles, you have the things you believe in, and you can transform the world. I know that because I have. And the point is, what I enjoy about coming in and talking to guys and gals like you is that you have no idea the power you possess until you have a chance to exercise it. And when you do, it'll blow your socks off. You know, that's what this is all about. So for me, I got back, here I am in California, my wife's in Milwaukee. We're obviously not doing all that well, and then I got laid off. 1982, recession hit. Nobody remembers this, but inflation. Now think about it. If you wanted to buy a house, my house was at 13% interest. Oof. And now we're paying 3.5%, 4%, something like that. It was nuts. And so I had to go out and start another business. And I started at that point getting into what you see me now as being coaching and motivation and all that stuff. And I have really enjoyed it. I have clients all over the Inland Empire here who are executives who bring me in to help them get connected with their front line. We had a client we just recently did. We doubled the size of the company and increased their bottom line profit by 8 times in a matter of 3 years. Well, how do you do that? You do that by listening to the front line. You got all these people who are down there saying, hey, I know the answer, but they're afraid to say anything. Or maybe they've said something they call it a troublemaker. So the point is that, you know, I want you guys to realize if you don't have the courage to say something, we purposely go out there and try to engage the front line and get the senior executives to realize that the answers to all their problems are sitting right in front of them if they give them an opportunity and share with them. And that's what I see about you guys. You know, you have this incredible opportunity. Don't let anybody push you around. You know, make sure that you let people know who you are and what you believe in. And do it with respect and do it with dignity. Do not back up. Does that make sense?
So Ray, just in kind of wrapping up here, but let me ask you, when you talk about that passion for what you know, what you believe in, what you know is right, and what you want to stand for, where's the balance between, you know, I'm not going to put up with anything that I don't believe in, with, you know, sometimes you have to do work that you just don't necessarily like because you have to pay the bills. What's the balance in that?
Well, I think, you know, there's a fine line between, you know, money's like oxygen, right? If you don't have it, you're going to die. So, you know, the thing is, like, we all have to work. But the point is, we can choose the work we want to do. We can be careful about the sort of things we have a passion about and try to align our passions with our work and our job. And I think what I see in you young people today that I really admire, you guys are saying, look, I want meaning. Face it, you know, I'm 70. And the point is that when I talk to the people who are my generation, they look at you guys and say, well, they don't care, they don't work hard, you know, they just, you know, I don't get them. And I always look at them and say, who created these people? You know what I'm saying? It's like, and my point is that I can't believe when I get a chance to talk to you guys. I mean, I have 4 children, you know, who are between 32 and 26, and I am just astounded as how dynamic you guys are. You want meaning, you know, we just wanted a job. You're saying, I want meaning. And that was same for me, you know, I didn't quite ever fit. You know, I was always looking for something that was beyond money. I wanted to make sure that when I did something, it made a difference. And today my fuse is short, so I need guys like you and gals like you to pick up the gauntlet and say, hey, we're gonna do this. And yes, there has to be a balance. But like when we go inside of organizations, I can't go in there and I'm an advisor, for crying out loud. You know, and I think God has a real good sense of humor because I want to be in control of things, right? And he said, well, that's not going to happen. You're just going to be an advisor. That means you get to tell people, here's a good suggestion, and they execute. So that becomes my balance point. But the interesting thing is when I'm given an opportunity to work inside and engage the front line, it's what I call cognitive reserve. It's all sitting there, all that brain power, and nobody's getting at it because nobody knows how to release it, how to make it work. And most businesses are fiefdoms. You know what a fiefdom is? A fiefdom's like medieval Europe, right? You got a king and his crown and his little entourage, and then everybody else is a serf, right? They don't say anything to anybody, right? The emperor's got no clothes, and they just say, well, he's really naked, but I'm not going to say anything, right? We need to have that engagement, and so that's what we do, is when people say, I have an idea, you know, I think we can do this. And it's just, it boggles my mind when the front line says, I got it, I got it. And then we can really transform things. And it's like you guys, when you come into these classes and suddenly say, I got it, that's when the magic happens. And it's even, you know, I have children, and it's the love of Christ. How do we get that across to people? It has nothing to do with religion or the church or anything else. It's about the love of Christ and uniting our mind around good-hearted principles, and that's what we try to teach. But I don't want to do it by thumping people with the Bible. I don't want to do it by saying, you know, you need Christ or nothing else. I need to be the example, and you need to be the example. If you're a good-hearted person and you care and you respect and you love people, they'll come to you.